Well, hello. I am finally done with Proust's In Search of Lost Time. This is book 7, Finding Time Again. And tell you what, this was a good book. I think all 7 of them are good books. I don't think that in terms of evaluating literature good or bad. I don't think many people would say they weren't good books, but so are a lot of books. And I have to say that, good book or not, these books were, in some cases, a real chore to read. This, in particular, I felt was a real chore, and I don't think it's the fault of this book that it was a difficult book to read. I think it was probably the fault of some aspects of the 6 that preceded it, and quite possibly um, the fault of some of the issues related to Proust dying before he was able to finish editing, particularly the 5th and 6th books. The 2 Albertine books, what am I supposed to make of, a book called The Prisoner and a book called The Fugitive, which detail the confinement of a young woman out of the jealousy of the main character? How am I supposed to, respond to that and say, oh, there's nothing disturbing or troubling? Of course, this book is disturbing and troubling. And what's kind of interesting to me is I did not immerse myself in criticism of these books by any means. I barely looked at the criticism, honestly. But in all the criticism I've heard of the books, even those that have described that that's what those books are about, there's been very, very, very little mention of that kind of disturbing content. And part of the reason is because I think in this last book, there are about half the book takes place almost immediately after the 6th book, and continues to deal with Marcel's involvement in the Paris scene after Albertine's death. But it makes some jumps. It jumps to during the war, and then it jumps to after the war. And, well, the first of these books details events that happened in the 1890s. Okay, so by the end of these books, it's detailing things that happened in, say, the very, very, very early 1920s, 1919, 1920, 1921, perhaps. Um, and Swann has died. Um, Robert St. Loup dies in the war. Uh, it looks like perhaps the main character's father has died. We're not told explicitly that he is, that I recall, but he kind of disappears. Uh, Gilbertine grew up. We found out in the previous book that she married St. Loup and had a child. So, and now at the end of this book, Marcel is introduced to her, Gilbert's 16-year-old daughter. So, and that's a kind of creepy scene in and of itself, because the main character is still fascinated with this youthful kind of person, and I'm wondering if Nabokov, when he wrote Lolita, had some sense of referencing back to some of this obsession with this young teenager, tween kind of age. Now, got to understand, sexual mores and illegalities of things change over time. So, lusting after a 16-year-old in 1895 might have been very different from what it was in 1920s, might be very different from what it is today. So we don't want to just jump to the immediate conclusion about what kind of sexual perversity we may or may not be dealing with here, because, uh, even if we might find it personally disgusting and personally distasteful, how it was dealt with in that time period, how people in that time period understood it, is going to inform how it's written about, whatever we may think of it. Um, you know, um, I think it's disturbing that the main character was somewhat sexually attracted to Odette Swan, Gilbert's mother, and to Gilbert had his first sexual experience. And then here it's implied he's somewhat sexually attracted to the daughter. I think that that is a disturbing trend. But you could take a more, feminist kind of approach to this and see this as, a critique of this, women as objects that, time periods change, people change, but this sort of, lusting after women, these women as objects for the male gaze within a patriarchal capitalist society doesn't change. Okay, and this book does deal an awful lot with the changes wrought by time, and that's kind of, it's kind of like the payoff of the entire thing in a way, and that here we see the same characters we've seen throughout, and they've grown fat, they have gone gray, they have lost their sense of, witty banter, banty witter, um, uh, witty banter. They've, or they've lost their sense of hearing, or they've just become senile, old, doddering fools. They've lost their sense of fashion. They've lost their place in society, or they've gained a place in society. Like there's a pretty crappy part of this book where La Burma, that opera singer that the young Marcel so much admired, holds a reception for nobody because nobody comes because they're all going to go see this, Rachel of the Lord or whatever he called Robert St. Loup's mistress back in the day, who was a courtesan, but now has become a singer, and she's like doing some recitation of poetry, and it's the same kind of pretentious, ill-equipped artistic jerks here as before, only fashions have changed into a different group of people. Before, in the first couple of books, there was a bunch of talk about, did you support Dreyfus? Did you oppose Dreyfus? Were you Dreyfusard? And some people saying they were proudly anti-Semites and things like this. And, now we're post-war, and all of that is, that's all old school. It's all, and everybody's now claiming to have been a Dreyfusard because, of course, at this time it's more popular in France not to be an anti-Semite than to be a Semite. And so all these people are essentially rewriting or obscuring some of the past or their involvement, perhaps, or their position in certain conversations and whatever. And that's all the things that the main character is seeing, how these people have changed over time. I don't know what to make of that. Yeah, and of course, a large part of this book deals with two things, which is the author finally deciding that it's time to quit dilly-dallying, quit just watching society and start to write. And him worrying that he's waited too late in life to actually accomplish the great work that he feels within him. And how, if you remember in book 3 when he was talking about Elster and how Elster's paintings were more real than reality kind of thing. Well, it's the same kind of thing here, is that reality is one thing, but writing about it, capturing it in art is more real and more lasting because reality is very fleeting. And so now he's thinking that, he needs to do the same thing in writing that Elster had done in painting, which is to reconstruct reality correctly. Better, I guess I should say, not correctly in the sense of like the way it was, but as it really, to really show it. And I think there's some concern here with kind of a Kantian kind of the thing in itself and the thing for others. What is something? It's something for you or something in society and that kind of thing. The ability to know what something actually is. And of course, the main object of study here are not things, they're ideas, and even more than ideas, even more than that, people. Who are people? Who is Gilbert? Who is Madame Swann? Madame Swann is very much part of this because she changes character dramatically. Not necessarily in terms of anything she actually does, but she's Odette, the courtesan, the lover of Monsieur Swann. She becomes Madame Swann, and she brings Swann, who has a high social status, she brings him down so that he is not able to be accepted into the best society. Okay? And then Swann slowly rebuilds his reputation, and she kind of sort of comes up with him a little bit, and then he passes away, and then she marries the Forchel and becomes Madame Forchel, and Madame and Forchel has reputation but no money, and she has money and no reputation. So she gains reputation by this, and then her daughter, Gilbert Swann, becomes Mademoiselle de Forchel, and she also manages to gain some reputation by this, and then she marries Saint Loup. And Saint Loup is part of the Guermantes, and so this is Swann's way and Guermantes' way have now completely come together, not just in Gilbert and Saint Loup, but in, more importantly, their daughter, whose name I don't remember. I think it was told, but I don't remember the name. And their daughter, who is really now the absolute reconciliation of of Swann's way and the Guermantes way, and and so everything in this book has become full circle. And now we understand a little bit better why did we get this history of Swann in the first place? Well, because that becomes one of the major threads in this book. And the main character, like a lot of main characters in books, isn't really the main character in the sense of it's his story. It's not his story. It's ultimately the story of Swann's way and the Guermantes way, which have slowly come together in the person of Gilbert, and even more important, like I said, her daughter, whose name I should remember, but I don't. I can look it up, but it doesn't really matter. But that is what this whole thing is about, and how reputations come and go, how words change, how reality changes, how our perceptions of it change. And that's what the whole thing about the Madeleine is about going back and getting this taste of the past, and reliving the past, but reliving it differently, because you're reliving the past through the lens of all the time that's happened between you and that time. And so that is what's going on here. And at the same time, you're going back and you're finding time again, or regaining time. You're also losing time. Time is constantly passing, and as you're finding time, you're also losing time. And that, in a nutshell, that's Proust. That is what this entire cycle of books is about. That's what this book is about. That's what the big payoff is that, it's time to write the great work. It's time to capture all of this history of all these things, of this passing of a world. And that really becomes a crucial thing, that, 1895 versus, the war period versus the after-war period. Time has changed. The world has changed. Time has passed, and the past is irrecoverable, except in these sort of fragmentary moments of memory, in these, like Madeleine moments and whatnot. And there you go. Okay, so like I said, it is worth reading, but it is long. And it is very, very, very repetitive, in the sense that do you really need 250 pages devoted to the different kinds of conversations in various parties? I mean, I read all of it, but I skipped over a lot of the details of that stuff in my coverage, because it really felt like it's the same kind of thing over and over and over and over and over and over. And some of the deadness of society is what I got of that. Just, it's the same rumors, it's the same gossip. It's the same posturing. It's the same ill-informed opinions. It's the same nonsense. It's one time it's these people. One time it's these people. It's the straight people. It's the gay people. It's the people who know that other people are gay or people are straight. It's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's upper class. It's the middle class. It's the rising. It's the lowing. Anyway, so all right. So hope you enjoyed it. I did, but I'm also extremely glad to be done.